Hi, Alex Simon, advocate with CoPIRG here today with another conversation from the Capitol, this time with Representative Meg Froelich. Representative Froelich sponsored a few bills CoPIRG backed this legislative session, including SB 193, which will tackle record-breaking ozone pollution with a package of air quality improvement measures, including the largest per capita investment in electric school buses. And we all know that when it comes to kids in school buses, kids deserve a ride to school that doesn't include toxic diesel pollution. Rep. Froelich also sponsored two bills around protecting the health of pollinators. We know the health of Colorado's ecosystem is tied to the health of our native pollinating insects. So really exciting legislation that happened this past session. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody.
Before we dive into these really interesting bills, I just thought we could spend a quick minute and just learn a little bit more about you and what inspired you to run for office in the first place.
I have come from a place of having supported, recruited, trained women to run for office for a couple decades. And in this particular instance, I was recruiting someone to run for this seat. And the women that I was talking to and trying to talk into it sort of said I needed to look in the mirror and stop bugging them and step up myself. And it just, the stars kind of aligned, and so I ended up stepping in and running. I actually lost in a primary. And then 2 years later, as often happens, dominoes moved around and someone resigned. And so I had the opportunity to then try for the seat again and took my place in the legislature in 2019. So I feel very lucky having a second chance at it.
Yeah, that's great. Good story of persistence. And so, as I mentioned, you sponsored SB 193, which has a packet of initiatives to help address Colorado's air quality. How did you come to sponsor this bill, and why is Colorado's air quality an important issue to you?
Well, obviously, it's critically important, and we live under this brown cloud. We're in ozone non-attainment. I mean, at ridiculous levels. We've had days where our air quality was worse than Beijing, that's not the Colorado we know, and it's terrible for our health and for the health of our citizens and our residents. So, huge issue. One of the reasons that I really wanted to be on this bill was to balance a little bit the grassroots, which I think the best legislation comes from grassroots participation, of which CoPIRG is obviously a model in that regard. And kind of this, in this case, this was really a lot led by the agencies and by the governor. And it was reflected in what he spoke about on opening day and in his line items on his budget. So that's great if we want to invest in electric school buses. And as you mentioned, the terrific benefits of that in terms of air quality and in terms of health of our children and our bus drivers and our whole community. But we also have to make sure that those electric school buses go to districts that really could use the boost economically, and that we consider traditionally underserved communities and rural communities and places where there will be a high benefit. And maybe not so much to places that we're probably might be buying electric school buses anyway.
Right.
So, and as this investment is significant, and thank you to the feds for that. And so we will be really high up on, I think it was CoPIRG folks who crunched the numbers and said we'll be either one or close to #1 state in terms of per capita. California is always going to beat us in sheer numbers, but per capita we'll have a lot of electric school buses. And it was similar with e-bikes. I'm very interested to make sure that those go to communities where it could really make a difference. And then in particular, I ran an amendment on that to just make sure that we're including the disability community and that the adapted bikes were also eligible for these grants, which they were. So that's kind of what my impetus was, to do some balancing and make sure that all voices were heard a little bit. And great set of ideas.
Yeah.
and a nice allocation of funds. But we just have to be really careful that the money goes to folks that have traditionally not been in the conversation, or
Yeah.
who have been disproportionately impacted by poor air quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that insight. And it is a great set of ideas, but it's nice to have a legislator like you and other voices making sure that there's an equity voice in the bill and that the money is really being used to incentivize or change behavior that might not happen otherwise, and I think that this bill does a great job addressing that. So yeah, and so thanks so much for sharing on that bill. You sponsored two other bills this session that were both around protecting pollinators. It is National Pollinator Week this week, so it's a good time to
Hey,
be talking about it. As we mentioned, our ecosystems and our food supplies, depend on the health of pollinators. SB 199 was passed. It's going to mandate a study of pollinators that will help provide data for future conservation efforts. I know SB 131 did not pass, but would have limited the application of pesticides, which we know are harmful for pollinators. Can you share with us a little bit about why pollinator protection is something you decided to prioritize this session?
sure. I have, I'm interested and was able to put forth other legislation all around the concept of both regenerative agriculture and carbon drawdown, carbon sequestration, and carbon storage, which is all a part and parcel. And of course, we need pollinators for robust agriculture and for robust planet therefore. And I think we felt like there was a direct connection between pesticides and our pollinator crisis, which really is alarming. And we thought we had a good shot because our Republican Senate sponsor is a former pesticide applicator or has a pesticide applicator license. And when you go in with a piece of bipartisan legislation, you feel like you have a better chance. The cards weren't right for the committee that it has to go through in the Senate. And that happens to us in the House too, but we're just sometimes more able to steer it away from the Ag Committee, which tends to be a very conservative committee.
Mhm.
And so I actually wrote a comedic song about called "Would You Like to Make Your Bill a Study," which is which is what happens when we hit roadblocks. And so and they can come from different places. They can come from the committee chair, it can come from the governor, it can come from our own members where we just don't have the votes. And that is kind of the "would you like something instead of nothing" route. Not a booby prize because it does move the needle, but it's not what you go into the piece of legislation wanting. So
Right.
we felt like there was a demonstrable connection between pesticides and our, as I said, our pollinator crisis. I've had conversations with CoPIRG before on other issues about the relationship between local action and state action and lifting the state preemption. So I have a wonderful group in my community, CASE, which is the Citizens of Englewood's efforts on behalf of sustainability. And they've long been pro pollinator and wanted to create spaces in Englewood that would be, which is the heart of my district, which would be pollinator habitats. And they come across this all the time where pesticides are adjacently used. So even if you carve out this space, you really can't make it what you want it to be because of neighboring applications of pesticides. So, so this study now, the bill that did pass, will we were careful, even though we're getting sort of consolation prize, to put language in to make sure that the next step is enacting legislation based on the study. I'm trying not to have preconceived notions, but when the study comes back, and if there's going to be, if there is a connection between pesticide application and pollinators, or the challenges our little pollinator worker bees are experiencing, then that gives us the data for the next step.
Yeah, absolutely. And we at CoPIRG have long, been working on the issue of specifically neonicotinoid pesticides and their relationship to pollinators, educating the public and working to limit them. And so what do you hope to see come as, next steps or opportunities from a policy perspective, following the data coming from SB 199?
Well, the great thing about working with folks like CoPIRG is that you have a national connections and national presence and national models. So, what have other states done in this realm? And a lot of places don't have the local control issues that we have. So they aren't always models for us. But, there's everything from banning sales at retail locations, that's just for regular consumers, but that I think that's a critical component. And there's greater education around the connectivity. We really tried on the bill that didn't pass, to exempt ag, or to put in as much language as we could to make the ag community more comfortable and not give them mandates.
Yeah.
And we just couldn't. Literally in conversations, we said, okay, we have it in the bill now 4 times. What will get you to a comfort level? And nothing.
Yeah.
So that's a real challenge. So the question is, will data connecting the dots help us get over that huge hurdle?
Yeah.
Or can we pass local, state and state preemption and incentivize local communities to do what they think is best?
Yeah.
But it ended up being kind of a fight on facts, of really, in a lot of ways, Boulder versus the rest of the state. And Boulder has gone farther, as they do, which is great, in the legislation that the city and county passes.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can prove that works.
Right. Well, great. Well, I think this bill is an important first step towards gathering that information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we hope. So we were happy. I mean, it was a happy, joyous bill signing. And when your bill is made into a study, it at least it's not nothing.
Do you want to make your bill a study? I'm always going to think of it now.
It lends itself to musical theater.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Representative Froelich. Really appreciate your time today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. Go CoPIRG.
Thank you. Bye.